ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا ونطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر قرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهدرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون
محمد وآل محمد صلوات आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन तेरा चेहरा तेरी आँखें भूल कब पाई हुसैन आज भी ज़ैनब की आती है सदा भाई हुसैन चलते ना के से गिराया खुद को जलती रेत पर चलते ना के से गिराया खुद को जलती रेत पर گھٹنیوں کے بل میں تیری لاش تک آئی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین، بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر، بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر، پھر کسی مشکل میں گر کر میں نہ گھبرائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین، کون تھا جو مرنے والوں میں نہیں تھا خوبرو، کون تھا جو مرنے والوں میں نہیں تھا خوبرو، بھولنے بیٹھی تو کس کس کی نایاد آئی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین، بہہ رہے تھے آنکھ سے آنسو تیری رخصت کے وقت، بہہ رہے تھے آنکھ سے آنسو تیری رخصت کے وقت، پھر کوئی آنسو نہ ٹپکا، آنکھ پتھرائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین، ہاتھ میں کوزے لیے سب آسماں تاکتے رہے، ہاتھ میں کوزے لیے سب آسماں تاکتے رہے، ابر نے ایک بوند پانی کی نہ برسائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین تیرا چہرہ تیری آنکھیں بھول کب پائی حسین آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بھائی حسین صلوات
اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات. کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے. دونوں بازو وہ شہنشاہ ہے وفا کے تھامے، لاش عباس پہ شبیر بکا کرتے تھے. بھائی تم بعد ہمارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے. اس طرح لگتی نہ اکبر کے کلیجے میں سنا، اس طرح ہوتی نہ سادات کے خیموں میں فغا. یوں نہ زینب کے سہارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے. گردن شاہ پہ یورن میں نہ کھنجر چلتا، یوں نہ خورشید امامت سر مقتل ڈلتا، یوں نہ سر نیزوں پہ سر جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے. ہوتے عباس دلاور تو نخے میں جلتے، شام غربت نہ سکینہ کو تماچے لگتے. ہوتے عباس دلاور تو نخے میں جلتے، شام غربت نہ سکینہ کو تماچے لگتے، گوشوارے نہ اتارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے۔ ہوتے عباس تو چھنتی نہ ردا زینب کی، پاؤں میں عابد مضطر کے نہ بیری ڈلتی، تازیانے بھی نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے۔ آج بھی آتی ہے یہ قبر سکینہ سے صدا، اے چچا لاتی نہ زندہ میں یوں ہم کو قضا، ساتھ اگر ہم بھی تمہارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے۔ ہو کے پابند رسن سید سجاد چلے، نہر کو دیکھ کے روتے ہوئے یہ کہتے لگے، ساتھ سب وطن ساتھ ہمارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے۔ صلوات۔
محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ اے امام زمان، آپ کا منتظر ہے یہ جہاں، اے امام زمان، آپ کا منتظر ہے یہ جہاں، بس ایک پار، بس ایک پار، اے وقت کے حسین نبا جاؤ ایک بار، ہو جائے ختم فاطمہ زہرا کا انتظار، بس ایک پار، بس ایک پار، غیبت کا پردہ ان کے اتارنے کے بعد بھی، علم و عمل سے خود کو سجانے کے بعد بھی، اور مولا کا ساتھ دینا ہے آنے کے بعد بھی، جانا نہیں چراغ بجھانے کے بعد بھی، ناصر ہے کون کون یہ ہونا ہے پھر شمار، ہو جائے ختم فاطمہ زہرا کا انتظار، بس ایک بار، بس ایک بار۔ اے وقت کے حسین اب آ جاؤ ایک بار، ہو جائے ختم فاطمہ زہرا کا انتظار، بس ایک بار، بس ایک بار۔ ہے مقصد حیات یہی قاسم کا، اٹکا ہوا ہے سینے میں دم اس غلام کا، پورا ہو خواب نصرت شاہ انام کا، بس ایک بار دیکھ لوں چہرہ امام کا، صدیوں سے ہے امام زمانہ کا انتظار، ہو جائے ختم فاطمہ زہرا کا انتظار، بس ایک بار، بس ایک بار۔ بابا اب اپنے زخم کو دھوتی نہیں ہوں میں، نو کے مزاج کے پروتی نہیں ہوں میں، اور دوروں سے خوف آتا ہے روتی نہیں ہوں میں، راتوں کو نیند آتی ہے سوتی نہیں ہوں میں، زندان سے سکینہ کو، زندان سے سکینہ کو لے جاؤ ایک بار، ہو جائے ختم فاطمہ زہرا کا انتظار، بس ایک بار، بس ایک بار۔ اے وقت کے حسین اب آ جاؤ ایک بار، ہو جائے ختم فاطمہ زہرا کا انتظار، بس ایک بار، بس ایک بار۔ محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ So welcome to today's wafat of Bibi Zainab Salamullahi alayh salawat. So Maulana is just on his way, Sheikh's just getting refreshed outside. So in the meantime, today's sponsors for the Majlis are displayed, or they were just displayed on the project. Oh, there they are again. So could we please recite Surah Fatiha for tonight's sponsors, please? Al-Fatiha. And while we're waiting, I think it's a good opportunity to recite Dua-e-Shafa for all the sick and the sick people out there. So if you can please all recite together Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'a wa yakshifus sur. 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 Perfect timing. Salawat. Allahumma salli Muhammadin wa ala. Okay, so let's just welcome again Sheikh Razawi to the mimbar with a loud salawat, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا أبو مولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم رجسا وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى صدق الله العلي العظيم. Tonight begins our commemorations, our mourning in this month of Rajab for the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen. 2 days ago we were gathered to celebrate, but as is the nature of Shiism, our happiness is when they're happy, and our sadness is when they're sad. Our love is for them, and our enmity is for them. The idea of become fani within wilaya is important at this stage. Why? Because the entire life of Sayyidah Zainab is atat of the Imam, is fani within wilaya, is fani within imama. This is why, come to notice, look who she is. You know, people always ask the question, that is she ma'suma? Perhaps if you take away the 14, they have ismatu kubra. For Sayyidah Zainab is nothing less than ma'suma. Why is that? Because she's fani within imamat. And that which is fani within Husayn is ma'sum in every degree. Similarly as Abul Fadl Abbas was, similarly as Ali Akbar was, and similarly as Qasim was. See, there's different stages of isma. If it just means not sinning, then I can show you people today who from the very beginning of their life to the end they've never sinned. Sheikh Bahjat, for example, never sinned. His entire life, not major, not minor. Never sinned. Ayatollah Bahauddini, never sinned. And there's multiple other scholars I can name, that's how they became who they were. So if sinning is the milak for isma, then believe me, there are a lot of people who haven't sinned. There's something far beyond that though, which we call isma. But look, that's not our discussion today. What is this? The verse of the Quran is very clear. That look, when the Prophet is leaving this life, this world, he says to the people, he says, look, I don't want anything. إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. If you want to give ajr, Allah is saying, love my near ones, love my family. Right? You've all heard this. It's nothing foreign to you. What does ajr mean here? What does mawaddah mean? And you've also heard this from others and myself as well. Mawaddah is an active love. It's not just a love which is hidden in the heart. It's an active form of love. And this is why you have two things within if you look at our fiqh, you have tawalli and tabarri, because both of them symbolize active love. For every time you say salawat, it's active love is mawaddah. And for every time you give la'an on the killers of Sayyid al-Shuhada, it's active love is mawaddah. It's not just about hiding it in your heart, as some of our Sufi brothers would say. No, we keep it in our heart. Or as one said to me once, he said, what you say out, we keep in our heart. I said, but that's not mawaddah, my friend. Mawaddah is active love, or active separation when it comes to the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. But look, that's not my discussion either. The discussion is this. When the Prophet says ajr, what does that mean? That means every single Muslim has a debt on his shoulders. Until that debt isn't paid, your Islam isn't complete. It's like if I go into a store, I pick up a bottle of water and I walk out. If I've not paid it, I've stolen. If I've stolen, there's no barakah in that. Same thing as this. The price for Islam and the price for Rasulullah giving you Islam, ajr risalat, is mawaddata fil qurba. Until you don't pay that back, your Islam is not Islam. The haqiqat that you have of Islam is not Islam. It's not complete. And this is why the only way it can be complete is when that wilayah is in your chest. Where do you see wilayah coming? Look and see Zamakhshari, for example, Sunni scholar. In one of the hadith he says, look, under the hadith he says that Rasulullah said that your Iman is not complete without the wilayah of Ali. What does that mean? Zamakhshari here says, he says, look, when your Iman becomes complete, then the asrat of sins don't come over you. What does that mean? Look, in this life, for every action that you do, there's a reaction. For example, if a person commits zina, there's 6 adhab that come onto you immediately. 3 of them in this world, 3 in the hereafter. When someone lies, there's adhab that comes onto them. This is why Allah says, look, don't commit anything which is haram. For if you do that, you're not affecting Allah, you're affecting yourself. And so 90+% of all of the trials and tribulations that befall us is because of our own actions. We don't understand it. If a person stops, for example, sinning, you'll see the vast majority of all bala leaves them, remaining one, and that is a test. And remember, a test is there to make you rise, increase your ma'rifah. So you never see it as a bala. What you see it as is a test to make you rise. So look and see. All of these things, all of these balas that befall a human being, it says even if you trip over, it's because of a sin. Now what does Zamakhshari say? He says if a person's Iman is complete, they understand the wilayat of Ali. And if they understand the wilayat of Ali, their Iman is complete. When their Iman is complete, no sin affects them in this world or the hereafter. That tells you something. It tells you this. You as human beings are going to sin. Imam hasn't given you a green card to say you're not going to. He says, my wilayah burns away the sins though. And for that wilayah to be there, what does it require? It requires you to become fani within that Imam. Tawalli and tabarri. In fact, no, other way around. Tabarri and tawalli. So now understand who Sayyidah Zainab is. Sayyidah Zainab is that person who was fani within wilayah and fani within imama. When a person is like that, their every action becomes the action of Hujjatullah. And this is why she never sinned. And look, even if I go even beyond that, look whose house she was born in. The house itself tells you, without even going into much detail, that she was a woman who was lofty. Now you can directly ask me and say, yeah, but what about the son of Nuh? Right? You can ask me that. What about the wife of Nuh? What about the wife of Lut? What about Habil and Qabil? You can ask me all of those questions. Very simple answer. In every one of those examples, there is a variable which is there. And that is either a wife, or a grandfather, or a grandmother, or a husband. All of these variables are there. If you go to that household, which we call the Ahlul Bayt, what do you see? You see one small girl. Her father is who? Sahib Kawthar. Mother is the secret of Allah, Sirullah. Grandfather is Khatamul Anbiya. The other grandfather is Abu Talib. That every single Imam, when they trace their shajara, they end on Abu Talib. This tells you that there's a loftiness about Abu Talib that we've not understood. When you look at the grandmother, Malikatul Arab. When you look at the other grandmother, the Kaaba opens for that woman. If you look at this side is Nur, if you look at that side is Nur. There is no variable there. There is no darkness there. There's no dhulamat. Every angle that you look at it, there's only Nur. And this is why the Quran says, Nurun ala Nur. Only then do you have a daughter like Zainab. So here she's born. You know the tradition says, the day she was born, Amir al-Mu'mineen comes to Rasulullah. He says, what should we name her? He replies, it says Zainab. Do you know how powerful that is? You've all heard this, but let me explain it to you again. Zainab meaning what? Zinatul Ab. Meaning the beauty of her father. Right? So you've heard this, you've digested this, but have you really understood what it means? Let's say, for example, your son becomes the prime minister, or your daughter becomes the prime minister. What is she to you or he to you? She or he becomes your zina. Why? Superseded you. Gained more fame than you. Maybe became a successful doctor. Maybe became a successful lawyer. So they become your zina. When your mother is Kawthar and your father is Qadr, tell me who is Zainab then? That Rasulullah is saying that this is Zinatul Ab. What is Ab though here? It doesn't mean father. Walidain Abawain. In the tradition it says no, here Ab is both mother and father. So see who Zainab is. Zainab isn't somebody small. When Rasulullah names her, it means she's lofty. The name itself tells you she's ma'suma. For if the mother is Zahra and the father is Haydar, then ask the question, who is Zainab? Who is Zainab? And this is why, if you go deeper, what do you see? When Rasulullah turns around and he says to Zahra alayhi salam, this daughter of yours is Ummul Masa'ib, then certainly there's a haqiqah to that. Zahra is that person who recited Thubbat alayya Masa'ib, and even she's not known as Ummul Masa'ib. Bintul Masa'ib is Sakina. Ummul Masa'ib is Zainab. So look, come with me on this. Say that Zainab is born. Zahra holds her in her hands. Zainab is crying. She tries to console. Zainab continues to cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen comes forward. He says, give her to me. Let's see what happens. Amir al-Mu'mineen holds her in her hands. Zainab begins to cry. She's not stopping. Rasulullah comes forward. Zainab still continues to cry. Hassan comes forward. Again begins to cry. Hadith says, a 1.5-year-old boy walks forward, says, give it her to me. Holds on to this baby. The baby stops crying, begins to smile, looks towards Husayn, and at that moment, what does that mother turn around and say? Says, this is who? This is Zainab of Husayn. Husayn smiles. Zainab smiles. Understand now this connection from the very beginning. Look, tonight is a night that you're here to cry, right? Honestly, this lady is a madluma. You know why? Because many a time she broke the heart of Zahra. Let me give you a tradition. Perhaps you may understand how madlum she is. You know the day when she got married, right? You know what the hadith says? Hadith says the day that she got married and the day she was meant to go to her husband's house, the first person she goes to is her old father. She comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. She kisses him, she holds Amir al-Mu'mineen's hand. And she just says one thing. Says, Father, if I've ever wronged you, for the sake of my mother Zahra, forgive me. Father begins to cry. She goes to every member of her household and she seeks forgiveness to all of them. They say, but when she comes to Husayn, she just says one thing. She says, Husayn, if it's possible, come and see me every day. Because without you, Zainab can't live in this world. Right? Look, imagine the relationship between brother and sister. But let me give you another tradition. Because look, there's very few traditions about Zainab. I'm going to give all of them to you today. At least you understand who she is. Husayn couldn't live without Zainab either. This love is both ways. If Zainab can't, Husayn can't either. Husayn can't either. So you know what happened? It says one day Imam Husayn takes permission. He says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, I want to go to the house of my sister. So Amir al-Mu'mineen went. So Sayyid al-Shuhada went. He comes to the door, Fidda comes out. Why? Because after the death of Zahra, Fidda was always with Sayyidah Zainab. When Sayyidah Zainab got married, Fidda said, I'm coming with you as well. She was a mother, right? She was a mother to Zainab. Fidda comes out. She says, son, your sister's sleeping. Imam Husayn says, can I just go and look at her? He says, yes. She gives peace of heart to Husayn. Sayyidah Shuhada walks in. Sayyidah Zainab is sleeping. All of a sudden, the sun's rays start coming onto the face of Zainab. Imam Husayn takes his abba and covers it. As he covers it, Zainab opens her eyes. She looks up and she sees Husayn. Then she sees what he's doing. She says, brother, why did you do so much zahma to cover my face like this? But she remembered this. When did she remember it? In Sham. Why? When a head was raised under the sun. Zainab looks at it crying. She says, brother, if only I could have covered your face as well. Al-Masaib. Look, I haven't even started to recite Masaib yet. But there's no way of mentioning Al-Masaib without that. That's the relationship between a brother and a sister. One can't live without the other. Why? Zainab is fani with an imamat. But Husayn also realizes that she who is in front of me is the mujassim of my mother Zahra. And that's what it was. When Zahra alayhi salam passed away, this 5-year-old girl became like the mother of the entire family. What would she do? She would wait for Amir al-Mu'mineen to come home. Why? Because whenever the Imam used to come home broken-hearted, there was a Zahra there to take his pain. And this is where you see that Zainab would be standing there. Why? So that her father never felt it. Her entire life is musibah. The worst thing is though, that her father felt that pain and he kept it to himself. This is why there is no one more ghareeb than Ali. Why? On the one hand, Rasulullah's ghurba. On the other hand, Zahra's ghurba. On the other hand, Zainab's ghurba. On the other hand, Hassan's ghurba. On the other hand, Husayn's ghurba. And that father with all of that, kept all of that in his chest. Now you can imagine why. When Kumail comes to him and says, Mawla, why do you go outside of Kufa for? Why do you cry in a well for? He says, what can I do? I can't give this to anyone. What is he going to do? Cry in front of his children? What father can cry in front of his children? That's what loneliness is. Ali was lonely. Hadith says, the most lonely from all of the Imams, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Even if you look at it, Imam Husayn wasn't lonely. You know why he wasn't lonely? Because he had Abu al-Fadl Abbas with him. You know why he wasn't lonely? Because Sayyidah Zainab was standing there. But imagine if you have no one but your children, then what? This is where the story begins. Ask yourself the question, have you given this ajr of risalat? Or are you like a thief who's taken Islam but hasn't paid that which is due on Rasulullah? So now look, trace the life of Zainab and you'll see. If I was to say after this introduction, there are 5 qualities that epitomize who Sayyidah Zainab is. 5 qualities. Look at them and see. See if you can apply them in your life. You know the one thing is about Zainab? First thing is this, wilaya. She had that belief in wilaya. She had that submission to the Imam. Look, batin of wilaya is tawheed. Batin of wilaya is tawheed. She understood tawheed. This is what Shiism is. True Shiism is tawheed. What is a Muslim? A Muslim is a person who submits in terms of their tawheed. This is why the term Islam or Muslim has come for the prophets as well. Look at the Quran and see. Musa, Muslim. Isa, Muslim. Ibrahim, Muslim. Question is asked. But they weren't alive in the time of the Prophet. They don't need to be alive. Islam has tawheed. This is why I remember a number of years ago, a very prominent Jewish rabbi said to me, he said, look, you guys have monopolized the term Islam. We're Musawi Muslims. Meaning what? Meaning we are mawahid, we are believers in monotheism, but through the lineage of Musa alayhi salam. This is why from Adam to Khatam, and the Quranic verses there, Inna din and Allah al-Islam. For Allah, Islam is the religion, which is the religion of monotheism. And this is what's been brought down from prophet to prophet to prophet. Batin of Islam, you could say, is wilaya. Batin of wilaya is tawheed. Therefore, tawheed is important. At every given time, you find that this lineage is such, time of the prophets, that there's always been a hujjatullah. Even in zamana fatrat, as they say. For those who don't know, fatrat is that time between Nabi Isa and the Prophet that they say there was no Prophet. That's not the case. There was no Rasul. But according to Allama Tabatabai, there was a Nabi. So there was no Sahib al-Sharia. But there were people who were hidden. And we find that in our tradition. For example, Khalid bin Sinan or Khalid bin Sinan. There's a Sunni tradition on this. I've seen it in Sunni text. I've not seen it in Shia text. Though Khalid bin Sinan is a prophet according to Shia text as well. He lived about a generation or two before our prophet, right? Tradition says one day his daughter walks past, and another tradition says it was his son, one says it was his daughter. But the fact was it was his child. It says Rasulullah was sitting there reciting Surah Tawheed. So this lady looks up and she says, Ya Rasulullah, my father would also recite something similar. Here the tradition says Rasulullah says salam on my brother, meaning salam on a fellow prophet. So though this time is known as Zamane Fatrat, but the fact is that Hadith says that there were 3 prophets who went through this time as well. They weren't prophets who were Sahib al-Sharia, but there was some type of prophet. And this is why Sheikh Saduq has also said that Abdul Muttalib may have been a prophet. Abu Talib may have been his hujjah in terms of his wasi. This is why the line of Ibrahim you find are known as Hanifs. The religion of the Hanifs is the religion of Ismail. So after Ibrahim, look, I'm deviating a little bit from our topic, but I think it's important to explain. Ibrahim has 2 sons, Ismail and Ishaq. Look at the Quran and see. Allah gives glad tidings. He says, Ibrahim, you're going to have a son. And those sons are going to be prophets. One son, Ismail. From the line of Ismail, the Hanifs. Who are the Hanifs? Muwahids. From the line of Ishaq comes Yaqub. Yaqub is known as Israel. So Bani Israel are his children. One religion from Bani Israel, which today we call Judaism. So there were only two faiths. Christianity traditionally was only a sect of Judaism until the 4th century, when it officially broke off and became an actual religion, which after the Council of Nicaea recognizes Christianity. Before, they used to be called Christian Jews, meaning what? They would do all of the laws of Judaism. The only thing that was different about them was they believed in the Messiah being Jesus, and they believed him as a prophet. So for 200-300 years, that sect was alive, and then after that was wiped out. And we're not going to go into the history of why they were wiped out, how they were wiped out, what is it, what is not. The fact of the matter is this: there are two religions. In those days, you could have been one or the other. Allah gave you autonomy. If you're an Ishmaelite, you're a Hanif. If you're from the line of Ishaq, you're a Jew, or later on a Christian. When Islam comes, it unites everything together. Right? When Islam comes, brings back this monotheism, and Islam becomes for everyone. Why is this important? Because what every prophet has, they had a partial level of wilaya. When that wilaya comes to the prophet, there is a unity there and an absolute wilaya. Why? Because in the hadith, if you look at it, you see Ruhul Qudus comes onto the prophet. And Ruhul Qudus is that ruh which doesn't sleep or slumber, which is infallible and which is connected to the nur of Allah. What is our prophet therefore? The greatest of all prophets. Why? Because all of the prophets that come together equals Rasulullah. Haqaiq of all of the prophets. From the Jamal of Isa to the Jalal of Musa, to all of the Haqaiq, the Haybat of Nuh, and your father Adam, all of the Haqaiq in our prophet. Ruhul Qudus is famous, right? And now let me explain it. When the Quran says Tanazzulul Malaikatu wa Ruh, Malaika's Ruhul Qudus, Malaika's Jibrail, Ruh is Ruhul Qudus. That's why Hadith says that Ruhul Qudus is not Jibrail, is not Mikail. It's superior to both of the angels. It's a soul. Every human being has 3 souls with them. A mu'min has 4, which is known as Ruhul Iman. But the Prophet and his family have something which is known as Ruhul Qudus. I'll give you an example. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, he says in every era there are 2 Qur'ans. Quran al-Natiq, Quran al-Samit. He says in Rasulullah's time, he was Quran al-Natiq, I was Quran al-Samit. In my time, I'm Quran al-Natiq, Hassan is Quran al-Samit. That's why you never see the other Imam ever interfere. If you notice, in the time of Imam Hassan, Husayn was Quran al-Samit, never interfered. In the time of Imam Husayn, Imam Zain al-Abidin, Quran al-Samit. This is why up to the last moment in Karbala, people thought Ali Akbar was the next Imam. Why? Quran al-Samit, Imam Zain al-Abidin didn't say anything. Quiet. Why is that important to be quiet? Why? One is Samit, one is Natiq. So in the time of Rasulullah, Rasulullah is Natiq, Amir al-Mu'mineen is Samit. Khalid bin Walid is sent to Yemen. What happens? Pillages, loots, comes back, can't convert an individual. What does Rasulullah say? Rasulullah turns around and he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, you go to Yemen. Right? Khalid bin Walid said, look, they're so shadid muta'assib that there's no way we can convert them. Imam says, look, let me go. Imam goes. Maghrib time he gets there. Fajr time the entire Yemen converts. Amir al-Mu'mineen comes back. Ashab ask, how did you convert them? He says, Quran and Sunnah. Khalid bin Walid looks up. He says, Quran is not complete. Rasulullah wasn't there, there's no Sunnah. What are you talking about? Imam smiles. He says, Ruhul Qudus was with me. Question is asked. Ruhul Qudus is only with the Hujjat of Allah. So for example, when the 10th Imam is, famous hadith, 10th Imam is sitting there, begins to cry, goes to his grandmother, says, grandmother, my father the 9th Imam, Imam Jawad has passed away. She says, son, don't say that, my son is young. He says, no, my father has passed away. He says, how do you know? He says, Ruhul Qudus has come to me. Ruhul Qudus, when an Imam dies, comes to the other. So the question can be asked here, if Rasulullah is alive, how is it possible that Amir al-Mu'mineen has Ruhul Qudus? The reply is very simple. The relationship between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Rasulullah is unique. Why is it unique? It is the only relationship in all of creation which is based upon unity. Why? One nur. In this world there are two. In that world they're one. This is why when Rasulullah goes to Mi'raj, he's going through all the awalims. He's going from one level to one level to one level. In the words of Allama Tabatabai, he begins to go mulk to malakut to jabarut to lahut to hahut. Ali is on the ground. Ali is in his bed. But for every time Rasulullah goes, that nur is connected. Nur can never be divided. Nur is only one in unity. Rasulullah is at Qaba Qawsayn. Amir al-Mu'mineen knows the conversation. So if there's a unity there, then imagine. Now understand who Zainab is. In her house, where she's born, the roof is the arsh of Allah. Her father is who? The actual term of Ayatul al-Udhama is for Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's Ayatul al-Udhama. Zainab's mother is who? Ismatullah al-Kubra. Imam Hassan and Husayn who? Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. Who do you think Zainab is? Honestly, other than a ma'soom, you and me cannot understand who Zainab is. If you want to understand Zainab, look and see Imam Zain al-Abidin. Who is Zainab? Alima غير معلمة. But what do you find in her wujud? You find in her wujud that she goes directly to Imam Zain al-Abidin to ask him, should we leave or should we burn? What does that tell you? That tells you she understands the haqiqat of imamat. But that also tells us that Husayn ibn Ali understands who Zainab is. Why? The entire imama is given to her to safeguard. In the same way that Sayyidah Fatima, if you look at Zahra alayhi salam, when she's in Baytul Huzn, what is she doing? She's molding imamat. She's taking nabuwa and she's connecting with imama. This is why Rasulullah said, he said, from my nur Zahra came. What does she symbolize? Look at the tradition. Look, go look at the tafsir of the Quran or the tafasir. Look at it and see what it says. Maraj al-Bahrayni yantaqiyan. Two oceans are coming. One ocean is the ocean of Nabuwa, one's ocean is the ocean of Wilaya. Here Rasulullah doesn't say, or the tafasir doesn't say that who? The ocean of Nabuwa is Rasulullah. No, he says Rasulullah is the Barzakh. The ocean of Nabuwa is Zahra, the ocean of Wilaya is Ali. Why? Nur of Nabuwa is found within Zahra. When she sits there in those 95 days, she's combining together what? Bringing together two lights. One, the light of Rasulullah, and one, the light of Imama. This is why Mus'haf Fatima is important. That every single Imam would say that it's written in the book of our grandmother. What is this book? Look at the tradition and see. On the first page, all of the knowledge of the 7 levels of reality are found. If that's the first page, then imagine what the rest of the pages are. This is Mus'haf Fatima. And look, you can very easily ask me, say, look, how can all of that information be on one page? And the reply is very simple as well. That from a nuqta, all of that was and all that is found. In that nuqta, everything is found. Maybe this is why Amir al-Mu'mineen says, التي النقطة تحت الباء. When he looks at that nuqta, and he looks at what's underneath that, what does Imam say? That nisbah he gives back to the Bismillah, the ba and the Bismillah in the Quran, and then he gives the nisbah back to himself. Why? Because the nuqta, according to Kumail, when he asked Amir al-Mu'mineen, what is the difference between the ba and the nuqta? He says, what is the ba? The ba is that which contains all of reality. But the nuqta is what? The essence of that reality. The dhat of the ba is the nuqta. And the ba is the dhuhur of the nuqta. This is why perhaps the Prophet said, Nade aliyan madhar al-ajaib. Why? Madhar is the makan of dhuhur of the ajaib, and the ajaib is the sifat and isma of Allah. This is why the nuqta, when it comes into alam al-dhuhur, it equals the ba. And what is the ba? The ba translates to this. The ba is mulk and malakut. You have two lines, and that line horizontally connects. What does that mean? That means mulk and malakut connects into one reality. That reality, the muwakkil of the ba is Jibreel, according to our tradition. The Surah Fatiha has four angels who are the greatest of all angels. Jibreel, Israfil, Mikail, Israel. Those people who know anything about the ulum al-ghariba, you'll know within the Surah Fatiha there's four angels. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen is Jibreel. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim to Maliki Yawmiddin is Israfil. Right? And so forth. Without going into it. So what does that tell you? That tells you Alam al-Kawn is found in Surah Fatiha. This is why if a person understood Fatiha, Hadith says if they were to recite it over a dead body, the dead body would rise. Why? Fatiha has haqaiq to it. But that Fatiha is in Bismillah, right? As per the Hadith. So what's Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? Hadith says. It says Isma Azam is contained in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Isma Azam is contained within that. But then it continues and says that Bismillah is found in the ba. That ba is found in the nuqta. Let me take it further and tell you. Nuqta is the substance for every single huruf, harf which is created. And huruf come together to create the greatest name of Allah, which is Isma Azam. This is why Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amali says, he says, Ali is Isma Azam. He says, continue to say Ya Ali, because you don't understand this Ya Ali is such that when that Ya Ali's nuqta comes into the heart is revived. So look, I'm going from one place to another. Now let's bring all of this back to Sayyidah Zainab. Who is Sayyidah Zainab? She's the zinat of her father. She's the beauty of her father. Why? Because she contains the haqiqah. And Amir al-Mu'mineen was close to her. But look, now that we've got here, can I tell you the relationship between Imam and Zainab? Let me tell you that relationship. And final thing I'll say is this, and then we conclude. Will you realize this relationship between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zainab is this? They say that when Zahra alayhi salam left this world, Imam was 33 years old. There's a particular hadith which ulama of Qum would recite. They would say that when Amir al-Mu'mineen went into the grave and he put Zahra in the grave, Zahra said, could you recite Quran in my grave? Said, fine. Amir al-Mu'mineen sitting there reciting. Hadith says that when he wanted to get up and leave the grave, he tried to stand. His knees began to shake and he fell. When he fell, he felt embarrassed. He looked up. When he looked up, he saw Salman was there. Salman just said one thing. He said, Mawla, we never saw you fall in Khaybar like this. What makes you fall? Amir al-Mu'mineen moved his eyes away as if he was embarrassed. You know why? Two sons were standing there. And those sons couldn't see their father fall. So Imam moved his eyes away and closed his eyes. Hadith says, second time he tried to get up. Second time his knees began to shake. Again he fell again, back on his face. Says the third time when he tried to stand up, he put his hand on the wall of the grave and he tries to stand up. Now understand this relationship he has with a 5-year-old daughter. Hadith says as his knees began to shake as his knees began to shake for the third time, he said something. He says, Zainab, come and help your father because your father's feeling weak today. Tradition says 2 small hands come forward. Says, Father, if my mother Zahra isn't there, Zainab is here. That's the relationship between a father and a daughter. Look, I'm going to recite slowly. Haqq is that tonight we cry for Zahra. Zahra Zainab. You come for Fatima, you cry. You come for the Shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you cry. You come in the 10 days of Muharram, you cry. But today, remember that Zainab represents 5 Ma'soomeen. Today when you cry for Zainab, in fact you're crying over Rasulullah. And you're crying over Amir al-Mu'mineen. And you're crying over Zahra. And you're crying over Hassan. And you're crying over Husayn. Where does this begin though? It begins here. It says that after Zahra left this world, one 5-year-old daughter would wait there waiting for her father to come back. And when her father would come back, she would wipe the tears away from his eyes. You know why that is? Why that is because she learned from her own mother. They say after Khadija died, another 5-year-old girl is waiting. She sees her father coming. Her father's covered from head to toe in blood. The people of Taif had stoned him. As father is coming, his heart is heavy. Why? He knows there's no Khadija. He knows my daughter is a yatima. How's she going to take it when she sees that I'm covered in blood? Tradition says, Zahra goes running. She says, Father, come down. Father comes down. With a small hand, she removes the blood from his face. She says, Father, don't be worried. If my mother Khadija isn't here, Zahra is here. What does Rasulullah say? Umma abiha. Right? Zainab learned. She learned from her mother. She learned how it is that when your mother dies, your father becomes gharib. When Amir al-Mu'mineen would miss Zahra, a small girl would come, put her head on his lap, put her head on his chest, put her head on his shoulders, would give peace. Look, some of you have daughters, right? Especially old fathers who are sitting. Immediately you know which father has a daughter. You know why? Whenever Zainab is mentioned, some father begins to cry. If I was to ask you fathers what the most difficult moment in your life is, you'd say that when our daughter gets married, right? When your daughter leaves you, what happens? It's that moment which is the most painful. Shall I tell you something? Amir al-Mu'mineen felt that pain. You know why? In the Hijazi culture it says that whenever, in those days, whenever a daughter would get married, it would be the mother who would take the daughter by the hand and take her to the house of her husband. They say Zainab was standing on the door and her father was standing behind next to the wall and he was crying. Why? There was no mother to take Zainab by... They say Fidda comes forward, holds on to the hand of Zainab. This is why Fidda was like a mother. Fidda was like a mother. Say Zainab goes. She sits down. Day goes by. Day goes by. One tradition says she raises her hands up in her room. She begins to cry. She says, Allah, I've never lived without my Husayn. Everybody knew this. Abdullah bin Ja'far knew this. When she said, when Amir al-Mu'mineen said, look, if ever Zainab wants to go with Husayn, let her go. They all knew this. They all knew a time like this was going to happen. This is why When Masa'ib's time came, she goes with Husayn. Ata'at of Zainab is such though, when Husayn says something, Zainab follows. You know what the painful or the most painful moment is though? As I said, slowly I'm going to recite. Most painful moment for Amir al-Mu'mineen is this. He's on the mimbar in Kufa. He gets off, comes home, says, Hassan, I miss my daughters. Can you go to Medina and bring them? In my words now. Can you go and bring them? Imam Hassan says yes. He goes to Medina. Amir al-Mu'mineen is on the mimbar. It's daytime. Imam Hassan brings them, but he leaves them on the boundary of Kufa. He comes in. He says, Father, your daughters are here. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen say? He says, son, alaykum bil-layl. For you is layl. 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 Why? Ali's ghayra can't take it. That his daughters are paraded in the daytime come in. Nighttime, let me come myself. Say an old father comes at nighttime. Maghrib time, he says to all of Kufa, Kufa, my daughters are coming. Says Imam goes old father. When he comes out, there was a camel. On top of that camel, there was a mahmal. Inside that mahmal was a daughter. He just says one thing. He puts his hands together. He says, Hassan, can you give me the permission so I can take my daughter's reins today and walk with a camel? Says, Father's your daughter. You could do what you want. Says he grabs onto the reins of the camel and he begins to walk. As he begins to walk, he says, Zainab, open up the curtains and see. This is the boundary of Kufa, daughter. Again he begins to walk. He says, Zainab, open the curtain and see. This is the first street of Kufa, Zainab. Again he begins to walk. He says, Zainab, open the curtain. This is the first road of Kufa. They say a time came where Zainab can't take it. You know what that time was? When Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Zainab, look, this is the bazaar of Kufa. Father, tell Abbas. Tell Muhammad Hanafiya. Tears in his eyes, Amir al-Mu'mineen doesn't say anything. But let me narrate to you something. Honestly, today, if you can understand Amir al-Mu'mineen's heart, understand this. They say Rasulullah is leaving this world. Zahra is crying. Head on her shoulder, crying. Rasulullah whispers something, Zahra smiles. They say Amir al-Mu'mineen is leaving this world. His face is yellow. Hadith says, face is yellow. Imam Hassan comes, he's crying. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, son Hassan, don't cry, have patience. This time will pass, son. Husayn comes, this time will pass, son. They say for everyone who was coming, Amir al-Mu'mineen was giving them tasalli. He says, but the only time Amir al-Mu'mineen broke was when Zainab walked in. When Zainab cried, Amir al-Mu'mineen began to cry. He comes forward. Zainab puts her head on the shoulder of Amir al-Mu'mineen. In the way Rasulullah whispered something, Amir al-Mu'mineen also whispered something. I looked around everywhere to find what that whisper was. One mujtahid told me this. Looked at the hadith is there. You know what it was? Amir al-Mu'mineen whispered something. Where do you see this whisper? Bazar-e-Sham. You know what that whisper was? Bazar-e-Sham. They say when Sayyidah Zainab got to Bazar-e-Sham, she sits on the door of the bazaar. People who had hot water, they chucked it on her. People who had stones, they were chucking. Rocks, they were chucking. Twigs, they were chucking. Eventually a time comes, Imam Zain al-Abidin comes. He says, Aunt, have you startled? Why don't you go in? My back can't take it anymore. Shimmer has been whipping me. You know what he replies? Sayyidah Zainab replies. She says, son, forgive me. I'm not startled. I'm not startled. But I know this is the most important moment, the most difficult moment. My father, when he was leaving this world, said to me, Zainab, A time is going to come when they're going to parade you in Bazar al-Sham. He says, Zainab, don't be startled. Zainab, wait for me, daughter. I'm going to come and take you by the hand and take you in. Says, I'm waiting for my father to come. History doesn't say what happened afterwards, but a daughter stands up and says, Assalamu alayka. Ya Amir al-Mu'minin. It doesn't end here though. Zainab comes back to Medina. Final thing. Zainab comes back to Medina. Look at the Maqat al-literature you'll see. You see when Zainab comes back, she says to Imam Sajjad, make sure there's a partition. I want to go to the grave of my grandfather. Hadith says she puts both of her hands on the door. And she says something. She says, grandfather, I want to tell you what happened to your Husayn. Ayatollah Ishtahardi writes, he said you could hear the wailing which was coming. Ahl Medina were wailing to the extent you couldn't hear the voice of Sayyidah Zainab. But Zainab with tears in her eyes says something. She says, Ya Rasulullah, if these men weren't here, I would have shown you what happened to my arms and what happened to my... A daughter may hide something from her father, and a daughter may hide something from her brothers, and a daughter may hide something from her husband. But they say when a daughter comes in front of her mother, she doesn't hide anything. She says, Sajjad, now take me to the grave of my mother Zahra. Says that when she goes to the grave, all she does, she opens up a box. In that box was a shirt. That shirt was bloodstained. She puts the shirt on her grave of her mother. Tradition says, the grave begins to shake. Zainab says, mother, grave is shaking. You can't take this. I was standing 70 paces away when Husayn's body wasn't on the ground and wasn't in the sky, on a bed of arrows. And Shimmer was walking. Mother, I was watching. Shimmer was walking. What did I see? وَجَالَسَ عَلَى صَدْرِهِ. He sat on the chest of Husayn, took his amama, chucked it on the ground, grabbed him by the beard, took a knife, began to move the... Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matem Husayn.
Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn. Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn. रोक ज़ैनब ने कहा है मेरे भाई अब्बास, रोके ज़ैनब ने कहा है मेरे भाई अब्बास। आग जालिम خیموں میں لگائی عباس، نام دربار میں ظالم نے لیا جب میرا، خون روتے ہوئے سجاد یہی کہتا تھا، ہائے افسوس کہ کیوں موت نہ آئی عباس۔ رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا کیسے تجھ کو میں بتاؤں وہ عجب لمحے تھے، سات شبیر کے تو تھا نہیں خیمے میں، لاش اکبر کی بہت دیر سے آئی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے سات اکبر ہے نہ قاسم ہے نہ اصغر بھیا، کوئی آور نہیں سایہ کوئی سر پر بھیا، مجھ کو اچھی نہیں لگتی یہ جدائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا درد یہ ساتھ میرے قبر تلک جائے گا، ہو گئے شام کے زندان سے سبھی لوگ رہا، بس سکینہ نے رہائی نہیں پائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے ہو بھلا کیسے بیاں لفظوں میں حالت میری، سب مسلمانوں کی بستی تھی جہاں سے گزری، ایک بستی میں بھی چادر نہیں پائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے رے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے چھوڑ کر بھائی کو یوں کون بھلا جاتا ہے، لاش شبیر پہ رو رو کے خیال آتا ہے، میں مدینے سے کفن کیوں نہیں لائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی، تذکرہ کرتا ہے جب کوئی کریمی کا کہیں، ایسا لگتا ہے یہ اشہر ہے کہ عباس یہیں، تجھ پہ نازاں میرے بھائی ہے خدائی عباس، رو کے زینب نے کہا ہے میرے بھائی ابا، آگ ظالم نے ہے خیموں میں لگائی عباس. یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ولا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الروح التي هلت بفنائك، عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا